Welcome to Cafe Stories, where every tale is a mystery waiting to unfold. A world of secrets, intrigue, and unforgettable adventures. Grab your coffee, stay curious, and lose yourself in the thrill of the unknown. Tonight, we begin Arsene Lupin and the adventure of the Djinn's Ransom. The moon cast silver shadows over the rooftops of Istanbul, a city where the past and present intertwined in a delicate dance. The Grand Bazaar lay in slumber, its countless treasures hidden beneath locked doors and the ever-watchful eyes of those who dealt in secrets. The distant echo of a call to prayer drifted through the air, blending with the faint scent of spice and aged parchment. In the heart of this labyrinthine city, within an opulent estate surrounded by high walls and guarded gates, a secret whispered through the halls. A relic of immeasurable worth, more than gold, more than jewels, lay hidden beyond the reach of ordinary thieves. The Djinn's Ransom. A name spoken in hushed tones, carrying with it a history of power, deception, and bloodshed. And yet there were those who sought it, those who saw it not as a curse, but as the ultimate prize. One such man watched from the shadows, perched effortlessly upon the roof of the estate. Arsene Lupin, master thief, gentleman rogue, a ghost in the night. His sharp gaze flickered across the courtyard below, taking note of every guard, every exit, every flickering candle in the stained glass windows. A challenge, a puzzle, a game, and Lupin never walked away from a game. But this time he was not the only player. Hidden dangers lurked beneath the surface, masked behind polite smiles and lavish distractions. Rivals, enemies, unseen forces moved their pieces in the dark. The first move had already been played. The heist had begun long before Lupin had even arrived, and before the night was over, the rules of the game would change in ways no one could predict. Chapter 1: The Phantom's Gambit. The city of Paris, veiled in the cold embrace of midnight, lay under a sky punctuated by flickering gaslights. The Seine rippled like liquid obsidian, reflecting the grandeur of a city both ancient and restless. The air was thick with intrigue, the kind that lurked in alleyways and behind the grand facades of aristocratic mansions. Here, in the labyrinth of history and crime, moved Arsene Lupin, gentleman thief, master of disguise, a ghost among men. Tonight, his world would shift, not by choice, but by the careful hand of fate. The night had begun as any other, a heist, planned with precision, a target selected with care. The Musée de l'Illustre, a lesser-known private collection, held within its walls something far more precious than its dusty exterior suggested, a relic of legend, the Djinn's Ransom. It was no ordinary artifact. Whispers spoke of a sapphire unlike any seen before, its depths mirroring the shifting sands of the East, its origins lost to time. A jewel said to bring fortune or doom, depending on whose hands it graced. For Lupin, it was not the legend that intrigued him, nor the wealth it promised. It was the challenge. A treasure so well guarded, so steeped in secrecy, could not be ignored. But something about this endeavor felt off. The usual thrill was accompanied by an unshakable sense of unease, like a hand placed too lightly on one's shoulder in the dark. He was not alone in his pursuit. Somewhere in the depths of Paris's underbelly, another player had emerged, Alistair Werner, a name Lupin had encountered only in whispers. A man with no past, no known alliances, and yet an influence that ran like an underground current through the criminal world. If the Djinn's Ransom was in play, Werner would be watching, and where Werner lurked, danger followed. Lupin had always danced on the edge of peril, but this time the stage was different. The plan was meticulous, designed as only a master tactician could craft it. A forged invitation granted him access to an exclusive gala hosted within the museum's grand halls. The world's elite gathered in their finery, their laughter hollow, their wealth displayed as casually as a silk scarf draped over the shoulder. But Lupin did not linger among them. He was a shadow slipping through corridors, a whisper passing unnoticed. The security was formidable, hidden tripwires, pressure-sensitive flooring, guards stationed at every key entry. Yet he had accounted for all of it. until he saw the door. It was not the museum's vault that gave him pause. It was a door he had not seen in any blueprint, not marked on any map. Unassuming, nestled between the great marble columns of the west wing, it bore no sign, no keyhole. It should not have existed, and yet it did. Lupin hesitated. He had stolen treasures from kings, evaded the world's greatest detectives, but instinct was a force he never ignored. Something about that door pulled at him, a silent whisper urging him forward. But as he stepped closer, the shift was imperceptible, just a fraction of movement in the grand hall, the kind most would miss. Someone was watching, not a guard, not a guest, a presence that did not belong. The weight of unseen eyes was a sensation Lupin knew well, yet this was different. It was not suspicion, it was calculation. He was not being hunted, he was being studied. And then, as if fate had scripted the moment, a whisper cut through the air. A voice not his own, not spoken aloud but carried on a folded note, slipped into his pocket by unseen hands. "The door is not for you." Lupin froze. The game had begun, and he was already behind. The note felt heavier than paper should. Lupin turned his back to the grand hall, his fingers brushing over the folded edge, as if its texture might reveal the hand that had placed it. The ink was faintly smudged, as though written in haste or secrecy. "The door is not for you." An invitation or a warning. His pulse remained steady, though his mind reeled. A hidden door, unmarked and unaccounted for. A message delivered in silence, unseen yet deliberate. These were not coincidences, they were moves in a game he had only just realized he was playing. Lupin stepped away from the west wing, blending seamlessly into the gala's tapestry of aristocrats and collectors. He lifted a champagne flute from a passing tray, tilting it to his lips in pretense, all while scanning the room. The architecture of deception was built on three things: observation, misdirection, and patience. Someone here had left that note, someone who knew that Djinn's ransom was more than just a jewel. But who? His eyes flitted over the guests, ambassadors, heiresses, merchants of power and privilege. Then a flicker of recognition. A woman stood near the gallery's edge, her posture relaxed, her presence almost imperceptible. Not because she hid, but because she did not need to be seen. Celeste Dubois. A name whispered in elite circles, attached to forgeries so flawless they had fooled the most seasoned experts. She was an artist of deception, a master of the unseen stroke. And yet tonight she had stepped out of the shadows. Not for the gala, not for the art, for him. Lupin turned the note between his fingers, then slipped it into his coat pocket. He approached with the casual ease of a man who belonged anywhere he chose to be. Celeste, he might have said, in another time, in another place. Instead, he let the silence carry the weight of his presence. She did not look up immediately, but when she did, her gaze was unreadable. A slow sip of wine, a flicker of amusement behind her dark eyes. She was waiting. For what, he could not yet say. And then, with the grace of a practiced illusionist, she leaned in ever so slightly, her lips barely moving as she whispered, "You should not be here." Lupin smiled, but the tension in his shoulders did not ease. "That makes two of us." Her expression did not change, but her fingers traced the rim of her glass. A code, perhaps. A silent message. One he had no time to decipher, because at that moment a sharp noise fractured the air, a sound too small for gunfire, too crisp for breaking glass. A lock disengaging. Lupin turned his head just enough to see it, the hidden door. It had opened, not fully, just a breath of movement, a sliver of darkness yawning into the golden light of the west wing. No one else seemed to notice. The gala continued, oblivious, champagne flowing, laughter ringing false and hollow. But beyond that threshold lay something the museum had not intended to reveal. Celeste's glass tilted slightly. A choice. A test. Lupin exhaled. He had not come this far to hesitate. With practiced ease, he moved, not too fast, not too slow, a phantom slipping past velvet drapes. He crossed the polished floor, every footstep measured, each motion a careful deception. One moment he was part of the crowd, the next he was gone. The door closed behind him, silent as a held breath. Darkness swallowed him whole. And in that darkness something stirred. Chapter 2. A web of shadows. The air inside was stale, laced with the scent of aged wood and something colder, something metallic. A vault. Not in the traditional sense, but a chamber meant to protect or conceal. Lupin adjusted his eyes to the dimness, his hands brushing against the textured walls. The passage was narrow, curving downward in a slow, deliberate descent. A hidden annex beneath the museum, unknown even to the most informed curators. But who had built it? And more importantly, why was it opening now? Somewhere behind him, the gala continued, the distant murmur of conversation and clinking glass, a fragile tether to the world above. But here, in this subterranean hollow, time moved differently. His fingers traced the contours of the walls, feeling etched patterns beneath the stone. Symbols. Arabic script, if his instincts were right. Some ancient, some newer. Layered markings left by different hands across centuries. A timeline of secrets, all converging in this one place. A whisper of movement. Lupin stilled. Not air, not an echo. A presence. He had never been alone. A shadow. Slipped through the gloom. A figure barely perceptible, yet undeniably real. Not Celeste. The shape was broader, the steps heavier, measured with the precision of someone accustomed to this place. Lupin's mind raced. Had he triggered something by entering, or had someone been waiting all along? His fingers flexed, ready. His pulse remained steady. There were only two kinds of people in a space like this, those who belonged and those who had trespassed. A flicker of motion, then light. A single lantern ignited, its glow sudden and sharp. The chamber illuminated in fractured pieces, shadows, stretching in elongated forms, and there, standing before him, was a man draped in history itself. A long coat of deep navy, trimmed with brass, its fabric worn by time, but not neglect. A scholar? A guardian? Or something else entirely? His eyes, dark and knowing, studied Lupin not with suspicion, but with recognition, as though he had expected this moment, and then, in a voice like gravel over silk, he spoke. "You are late." Lupin did not move. The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Late for what? A meeting? A ritual? A destiny he had never agreed to? The man's gaze flickered to the walls, to the script carved deep within them. "You can read this, can't you?" It was not a question, but a confirmation. Lupin's lips curled, though he remained unreadable. "I can try." The man studied him for a moment longer, before stepping aside. Beyond him, a grand doorway loomed, ornate, ancient, waiting. It had no keyhole, no visible lock, only an intricate mosaic, shifting under the lantern's flickering glow. A puzzle waiting to be solved. Lupin's pulse quickened. He had stepped into something far larger than a heist, far older than a legend, and for the first time in years, he wasn't sure if he had found the treasure, or if it had found him. The mosaic gleamed under the lantern's flickering light, its fractured tiles shifting in uneven patterns. At first glance, it seemed like nothing more than an elaborate piece of art, a testament to the craftsman of a forgotten era. But Lupin knew better. It was a lock. A cipher disguised within the art, waiting to be deciphered. He ran his fingers lightly over the surface, feeling the delicate grooves between the inlaid stones. Symbols interwoven, a puzzle of language and precision. The scholar, the man in the navy coat, watched in silence, as though measuring Lupin's every reaction. This was no ordinary heist. This was a summons, a test designed for him long before he had ever stepped foot in this chamber. But by whom? Lupin exhaled slowly, steadying his thoughts. A test had two outcomes, success or failure, and the latter was never an option. His mind raced through the fragments of knowledge he had gathered over the years. Arabic, Persian, French, a blend of civilizations layered over time. The inscriptions bore elements of ancient protection rites, but more importantly, they formed a sequence, a code buried beneath history itself. His fingers found a tile marked with a crescent moon. He pressed it. A deep, mechanical click. The scholar's lips barely parted, but something flickered in his expression. Recognition. As if Lupin had just confirmed something he already suspected. Lupin continued. A second tile, a sunburst, slightly misaligned. Another press, another click. The air in the chamber shifted. Not a sound, but a feeling, as though something unseen had begun to stir. Lupin did not hesitate. He reached the third tile, a falcon in flight. The moment his fingers pressed down, the shift became a tremor. A whispering sound, soft at first, then growing. Stone grating against stone. Dust trembling loose from the ancient carvings. The mosaic shuddered, its intricate patterns disassembling and reforming into something else. A gateway. The scholar stepped back, eyes still locked on Lupin. There was no need for words. Whatever lay beyond this threshold, it had been waiting for him. A final echo rumbled through the chamber as the last lock disengaged. The doorway, sealed for centuries, slid open. A corridor stretched beyond, its passage lost in darkness. A Kiat, realm untouched, secrets buried within its depths. And yet, something lingered in the air. Not just the weight of time, but the presence of something else. Something unseen, yet watching. Lupin tilted his head slightly. He had felt this before. The sensation of standing at the edge of history, just before it decided to consume you. He turned to the scholar, his smirk never fading. "Shall we?" Man merely nodded. Together they stepped forward, into the unknown. Chapter 3. The Maze of Deception. The night hung heavy over Istanbul, its silence broken only by the distant murmur of the Bosphorus and the whisper of fabric as merchants closed their stalls. Yet, amidst the labyrinthine alleys of the Grand Bazaar, another kind of silence reigned, one that spoke of unseen eyes and footsteps too light to belong to an ordinary passerby. Arsene Lupin, master of disguises and architect of deception, was being followed. He had sensed it first as an impression, a weight in the air that logic could not define, but instinct could not ignore. A momentary flicker in his periphery, a breath too measured, a shadow that did not belong. He had encountered pursuers before, police, rivals, assassins, but this was different. This presence was not chasing him in desperation, nor moving with reckless intent. No, whoever lurked behind him was watching, waiting. Lupin did not turn, nor did he alter his pace. A lesser man might have quickened his steps, taken erratic turns in the hope of losing his tail, but Lupin understood the psychology of pursuit. The hunter must be drawn into believing they remained unseen. The prey must dictate the chase without ever seeming to run. The Grand Bazaar, despite the lateness of the hour, still pulsed with lingering energy. The scent of cardamom and saffron clung to the air, mingling with the aged musk of leather-bound tomes in forgotten stalls. He maneuvered through the crowd, a ghost amid phantoms, slipping between the remnants of commerce with a practiced ease. That left no trace of urgency. Then a test. He turned a corner sharply, stepping into a narrow passage between ancient walls. Here, the din of the market faded, replaced by the hush of stone corridors, untouched by time. He stopped. Nothing. The silence stretched, thick as ink, but Lupin was not fooled. He reached into his coat pocket, fingers brushing the cool metal of an ornate key, a keepsake stolen not for its value, but for its meaning. With a flick of his wrist, he let it drop. The metallic chime echoed against the stone. Then the mistake. A breath, shallow, quick, controlled, but not enough. The hunter had hesitated. Lupin smiled. Now the game had changed. Lupin did not move immediately. He let the silence stretch, savoring the hesitation of his unseen pursuer. In a game of shadows, hesitation was a confession. A lesser adversary might have lunged, thinking the trap had been sprung. But Lupin had played this game far too many times to be reckless. With deliberate slowness, he knelt, retrieving the fallen key. His fingers brushed against the cold stone beneath him, smooth with centuries of wear. He feigned ignorance, dusting, his sleeve with an air of indifference, then turned back towards the main path. And then he moved. A pivot, swift and seamless, as he twisted into the darkness of an adjacent alley. It was narrow, lined with forgotten relics of Ottoman grandeur, an ideal web for a spider to lure its prey. He pressed himself against the cool stone, listening. Footsteps, light, cautious. They did not rush after him, nor did they fall away. His pursuer was skilled, but skill could be turned against itself. A gust of wind coiled through the passage, carrying the distant chime of the Bosphorus lapping against the docks. It carried something else too, a scent. Tobacco, rich and spiced, the kind favoured by men who belonged to old secrets and older debts. Lupin inhaled deeply, memorizing it. A trail was as much scent as it was movement. Then the moment came. Oh, shift in weight. A single step too close. Lupin struck. A flash of motion, his hand shot forward, grasping the wrist of the phantom who had stalked him through the city's veins. A twist, a pivot, and in a breath the roles had reversed. The pursuer found themselves pinned against the stone, Lupin's arm a vice against their throat. Yet what he found staring back at him was not what he expected, not a faceless assassin, not an agent of the law, but a woman. Her eyes, sharp as cut glass, held no fear, only defiance. Even caught, even trapped, she did not flinch. She had been following him, and she had wanted him to know, a message sent without words. This was no ordinary spy, this was a warning. Lupin's grip did not loosen, but his mind reeled with calculations. Who was she? An enemy? A pawn of a greater force? Or something far more dangerous? An independent agent with her own motives? The woman did not struggle. She did. Not beg or plead. Instead, she held his gaze with the same quiet confidence he recognized in himself. The kind of person who was always 5 moves ahead. A silent conversation passed between them in that narrow alleyway. The scent of aged tobacco still clung to the air, mingling with the salt of the distant sea. She had known he would come this way. She had led him here deliberately. But why? Lupin adjusted his stance. His fingers eased, but his presence remained immovable, a shadow looming over her. Still, she did not move. Then the moment came. A flicker, almost imperceptible, a shifting of her shoulders. Lupin saw it for what it was. Not an attempt to escape, but an invitation, a challenge. He let her go, the woman straightened, adjusting. The folds of her coat, as if their brief struggle had been nothing more than a formality. Then, with the same calculated grace, she reached into her pocket. Lupin tensed, but she did not pull a weapon. Instead, she held out a single item. A coin, not just any coin, ancient, weathered, gold worn smooth by centuries. And on its surface, a symbol. Lupin knew it instantly. The Djinn's mark. A phantom from history whispered about in the back rooms of auction houses and among thieves who traded in more than just riches. A legend that spoke of a lost treasure guarded by unseen hands. A curse that left only ghosts behind. Lupin's pulse quickened, but outwardly he remained still. He had chased myths before. Some held truth, others held only death. The woman tilted, her head waiting. A test? A trap? Or an offer? Lupin took the coin, feeling the weight of centuries in his palm. He turned it over with his fingers, studying its markings, Arabic script, an intricate pattern of interlocking stars. The symbol at its center was unmistakable. The Djinn's ransom. A treasure said to be older than any empire, a hoard hidden in the shifting sands, protected by those who wished never to be found. It had surfaced before, in whispers, in murders, in disappearances that left no trace. Now it was here. Lupin looked up, but the woman was already stepping back. A smile, subtle, knowing, played at her lips. She had given him a clue, but also a warning. He was being watched. Hunted, and if he followed this path, there would be no turning back. But then wasn't that exactly why he was here? Lupin closed his fingers around the coin. The coin felt heavier than gold had any right to be. Its weight pressed against Lupin's palm like a phantom's grip, its presence a quiet, insidious whisper. He had spent years chasing legends, unraveling the tangled threads of forgotten histories. But this was different. This was personal. The Djinn's ransom, if it existed, was not merely a prize. It was a curse, a thing spoken of only in half-truths, in hushed voices. Men who sought it had a way of vanishing, their names erased, their fates unknown. And yet here it was, placed into his hands by a woman who had disappeared as silently as she had arrived. Lupin turned the coin over once more. The script carved into its surface was unmistakable, ancient, elegant, but weathered by time. The Djinn's mark. A flicker of unease passed through him, but he buried it beneath the layers of his carefully cultivated confidence. He had to move. The city stretched around him, a labyrinth of narrow alleys and dimly lit streets. Every shadow felt deeper now, every passerby a potential threat. He had walked these streets 1,000 times, but tonight they felt different. He was being followed, not by the police, not by clumsy agents or amateur spies. No, this was something else. Something patient. Lupin adjusted his collar, his stride never breaking rhythm. He reached the street where he had arranged to meet his informant, an old locksmith who traded secrets as easily as he forged keys. But as he turned the corner, he stopped cold. The door to the locksmith's shop hung open. No, not open. Forced. The wood was splintered where the lock had been torn apart, jagged edges catching in the moonlight. A warning. Lupin stepped inside, every nerve on edge. The scent of oil and iron filled the air, mingling with something sharper, something wrong. Blood. Not much. Just a smear across the work table, a dark streak trailing toward the back room. A message, deliberate and cruel. Lupin's mind moved fast, calculating. The locksmith was no fool. He knew the risks of dealing with men like Lupin. If he had been taken, it was because he had something worth stealing or something worth silencing. Lupin exhaled slowly, willing his pulse to steady. Whoever had done this had left in a hurry. They had taken what they needed, but they hadn't lingered. That meant he still had time, but not much. His eyes flicked across the shop, searching. The usual signs of a struggle, overturned chairs, scattered papers, told part of the story. But it was the small details that mattered. And then he saw it, a single key resting on the work table, untouched, not hidden, not discarded, placed. A clue. Lupin picked it up, running his thumb over its notches. The design was old, intricate. A key meant to unlock something important. A key meant for him. Outside, the streets were too quiet. Someone was waiting. Chapter 4. The edge of the knife. The key burned cold against Lupin's palm, its metal ridges digging into his skin. A relic of intent, left behind with purpose. Not a mistake. Not an accident. A challenge. He moved quickly, stepping back. Into the street, his senses sharpened to every flicker of movement, every shift of shadow. The city breathed around him, indifferent to the hunt unfolding within its veins. Paris had always been a playground for men like him, thieves, deceivers, ghosts slipping through the cracks. But tonight, the game was different. Tonight, someone else was pulling the strings. The locksmith's disappearance was no coincidence. The key was meant to lead him forward, but to what? A door, a vault, a trap. Lupin turned the object over in his fingers. Old, worn, yet well kept. The engraving on the bow, a sigil barely visible beneath years of wear. Recognition struck him like a blade. He knew this symbol. The House of Mirabeau. A name spoken in hushed whispers, woven into the fabric of Paris's darkest dealings. An old estate, abandoned for years, at least in theory. No one dared approach. It, those who did, never returned. Lupin smiled, though there was no humor in it. The game had begun in earnest. He moved fast, weaving through the city, his steps silent, precise. He knew the streets better than most men knew their own reflections. Every corner had an escape, every alley an unseen exit. He counted the breaths. Between footfalls, listening for the sound beneath the noise, and then, there. A second pair of steps, too careful, too measured, not the police, not common thugs, someone trained, someone waiting for him to slip. Lupin didn't falter. To hesitate was to lose. Instead, he led them forward, deeper into the city's veins, through the alleys where the lamplight didn't reach. He quickened his pace, not running, but tempting, inviting pursuit. The footsteps followed. Good. He turned sharply at the next corner, slipping through a narrow passage between two buildings, the kind of gap most men wouldn't dare enter. His pursuer hesitated, a fraction of a second too long. That was all Lupin needed. He spun back, a flick of his wrist sending a small mirrored shard into the moonlight's path. A trick of angles, a glint of false movement, just enough to shift his pursuer's focus. Then he struck. A calculated blow, swift, controlled. His hand clamped around the man's wrist before he could draw his weapon, twisting just enough to disarm, not to break. A knife clattered to the ground. Lupin didn't wait for words. He slammed the man into the wall, pinning him in the dark. The stranger's breath came sharp, but he didn't panic. He was trained, and that meant he wouldn't talk easily. Lupin leaned in, his voice a whisper against the tension in the air. "Who sent you?" The man didn't answer. Lupin tightened his grip. He had no time for games, and then a sound, not from his captive, from behind him. Too late. The trap had already been set. A whisper of movement, a shift in the air. Lupin reacted on instinct. He twisted, releasing his captive as a shadow lunged from behind. A blade cut through the darkness, missing him by inches as he sidestepped. The assassin had waited for this moment, concealed in silence, calculating the perfect second to strike. But perfection was an illusion. Lupin had built his life on exploiting the flaws within it. He dropped low, sweeping his leg in a fluid motion. His unseen attacker staggered, but not for long. These were professionals. Lupin had no time for mistakes. His first pursuer had recovered, reaching for his fallen weapon. Lupin moved faster. A sharp kick sent the knife skittering into the darkness. He pivoted, his momentum carrying him into the second attacker's blind spot. A precise elbow to the ribs, a grunt of pain, a stumble back. But the trap was already closing. More figures emerged from the alley's mouth, blocking the only open exit. 5, no, 6, all dressed in dark clothing, their eyes glinting in the faint streetlight. Lupin's pulse remained steady, but the stakes had shifted. This wasn't a simple tale. They weren't here to watch. They were here to eliminate, and that meant he was getting too close to something. He adjusted his stance, mind racing through possibilities. He could fight, take down 2, maybe 3, before they overwhelmed him. But that wasn't the game he played. Lupin never fought fair. His hand brushed against his pocket, feeling for the small metal sphere he had prepared for moments like this. A custom creation, harmless in itself, but designed for illusion. Smoke, light, confusion, theatrics. He smiled, slow and deliberate, as if unbothered by the odds stacked against him. Let them believe they had him cornered. Let them feel the taste of victory. "Gentlemen," he murmured, voice smooth as silk. "You took your time." A flick of his wrist, the sphere dropped to the ground. A sharp click. Then chaos. The alley erupted in a burst of thick, blinding smoke. Lupin was already moving. A feint left, a true escape right. He slipped past the closest figure before they could react, vaulting over a discarded crate. The confusion bought him. Seconds, no more, but that was all he needed. Gunfire cracked behind him, muffled by the dense fog. A bullet tore into the brick beside his head as he darted through a side passage, disappearing into the maze of the city. He didn't stop, didn't look back. He had what he needed. They had come for him. They had revealed themselves. And that meant the key, the House of Mirabeau, was the answer. Lupin moved through the night, the city, his domain, his sanctuary. He would reach the house before they could regroup, before they could prepare. The game had entered its final stage, and Arsene Lupin never lost. The House of Mirabeau loomed before Lupin, its stone facade bathed in moonlight, the weight of centuries pressing down on its weathered walls. It was not merely a house, it was a monument to a forgotten history, a vault of secrets buried beneath its foundations. Tonight it would reveal its truths, or claim another soul in silence. Lupin moved with careful precision, his senses sharp. The air smelled of damp stone and aged wood, laced with the faint, acrid scent of gunpowder, proof that his pursuers were not far behind. He had no illusions. They would come. The only question was when. The entrance was locked, of course.
Not an obstacle, merely an inconvenience. His fingers traced the edges of the old iron keyhole, feeling for the mechanism's weaknesses. A flick of his wrist, pressure in the right place, and the door yielded with a soft click. He slipped inside. The darkness was thick, almost alive. The house had been abandoned for decades, yet it was not empty.
The weight of something unseen pressed against the walls, the silence too perfect, too intentional. Dust clung to the air, swirling in the dim light of his lantern as he advanced through the main hall. Ornate furniture, draped in sheets, lined the space like ghostly sentinels. A grand staircase twisted upward, disappearing into the abyss above. But Lupin had no time to waste. He moved deeper, following the mental map he had pieced together from scattered fragments. Old blueprints, whispered legends, half-burned documents retrieved from places no one dared to search. The truth lay below. These two cellar. A door at the end of the corridor. Heavy, reinforced. Not original to the house. Added later. A warning or a prison. He would soon find out. His lockpicks whispered against metal. The mechanism resisted, as if unwilling to betray its secrets. A second attempt, slower, more precise. The tumblers fell into place, a deep thud as the bolts slid free. He pushed the door open. The scent hit him first. Damp earth, old parchment, something metallic beneath it all. Blood. No, something older, something buried. Stone steps descended into a void. Lupin exhaled, steeling himself. He had come too far to hesitate.
Now. Footsteps above, faint, deliberate. He had been followed. His mind raced.
He could retreat, face them in the open, where he had control. But that would mean abandoning whatever lay ahead. And that was not an option. A choice, then. Lupin extinguished his lantern, letting the darkness embrace him. He slipped inside, pulling the door shut behind him just as the first shadow crossed the threshold of the hall. Whoever they were, they would find nothing. Only an empty house, and by the time they realized where he had gone, it would be too late. The secrets of the House of Mirabeau awaited, and Arsene Lupin would claim them first. The stone steps spiraled downward into darkness, each one colder than the last. Lupin moved carefully, his fingers brushing against the damp walls for balance. The silence was oppressive, wrapping around him like a shroud. Only the faint echo of his footsteps betrayed his presence. Behind him, the heavy door above had closed, sealing him in. If a trap had been laid, he had already sprung it. Yet there was no turning back. He had chosen this path. Now he had to see it through. A flick of his hand ignited a small pocket torch, its narrow beams slicing through the suffocating blackness. The passageway ahead was ancient, lined with rough-hewn stones, some crumbling with age. Dust coated the way, air stirred by his movements, thick enough to taste. This was no mere cellar, it was something far older, a crypt, a vault, or perhaps something even more sinister. The air changed, stale, unmoving. He had entered a chamber, the space stretched wider than he expected, the ceiling lost in darkness. At its center stood a pedestal, draped in shadow. Something rested upon it, its shape barely discernible in the dim glow. Lupin approached, pulse steady but alert. The object, a small, ornate chest, was covered in intricate carvings, symbols he recognized from his research. A relic of the Djinn's.
Ransom.
The truth he sought was within reach. His fingers brushed the lid, a sound, soft, inhuman, the scrape of stone against stone. He turned sharply, scanning the darkness beyond his torch's reach. He was not alone. A slow inhale, a flicker of movement. Lupin had walked into something deeper than a simple mystery. And whatever lurked in the abyss of the House of Mirabeau, watching, waiting, had finally stirred. Chapter 5. The Phantom's Last Move. Lupin remained perfectly still, every muscle coiled, every sense sharpened. The darkness around him felt alive, pressing in like a silent predator. The faint shuffle of movement had ceased, but that only deepened the unease. Something, or someone, was here, concealed within the abyss. His grip tightened on the edge of the ornate chest. Instinct urged him to flee, but reason kept him anchored. If he turned his back now, he might not make it out. Instead, he exhaled slowly and reached for the lid, determined to complete what he had come for. The moment he lifted it, the torches along the chamber walls erupted into flames. The sudden burst of light cast jagged shadows across the ancient stone, revealing what had been hidden. Figures. They stood along the edges of the chamber, silent and unmoving, their faces obscured beneath deep hoods, a dozen at least, cloaked in the same symbols that adorned the chest. They had been waiting, watching. Lupin did not flinch. He merely straightened, his hand still resting on the open chest. Inside, resting upon faded velvet, lay a single, blood-red gemstone, its surface pulsing faintly as though it were alive. The Djinn's ransom. A voice broke the silence, smooth and deliberate. "You have come far, Monsieur Lupin," it said. The speaker stepped forward from the circle of figures. His robes were more elaborate, woven with gold filigree, the hood drawn just enough to obscure his features. But Lupin recognized the posture, the authority. He had seen this man before, across tables in elite parlors, on the periphery of whispered conspiracies. The man continued, his tone neither welcoming nor hostile. "And now, you stand at the threshold of a truth that few are allowed to see." Lupin's eyes flickered between the figures. The door behind him was still open, but he knew better than to make a desperate move. There was no panic in his chest, only calculation. "You should have turned back," the man said. "Now you belong to the game." With a quiet motion, the figures began to step forward. The air grew heavy with something unseen, something ancient. Lupin smiled. A slow, knowing smile. The night was restless, thick with the kind of silence that carried hidden whispers. Paris, usually a city of shimmering lights and effortless charm, now stood frozen in anticipation. The Seine, dark and sluggish, reflected the flickering street lamps as if hesitant to reveal the secrets it held beneath its rippling surface. The tension that had simmered throughout the chase was now reaching its inevitable peak, leading Arsene Lupin toward the point of no return. Every step he took through the abandoned railway tunnels beneath the city resonated in eerie echoes. The air was damp, laced with the metallic scent of rust and something more sinister, perhaps the remnants of old betrayals or the decay of promises never kept. The Djinn's ransom was within reach. It had to be. Yet every instinct within him screamed that he was walking straight into a game far more intricate than he had anticipated. His adversary had been relentless, always a step ahead, always anticipating. His moves with uncanny precision. A master tactician who understood Lupin's mind as if they had once been mirror reflections. The cat-and-mouse game that had stretched across continents was nearing its final gambit. The stolen artifact, an enigmatic relic steeped in ancient mystery, had passed through too many hands, leaving a trail of deception and blood. Now it was here, somewhere in the depths of the city, waiting to either be claimed or lost forever. He moved deeper into the tunnel. Lupin's thoughts sharpened. He had uncovered truths that defied logic, whispers of an unseen force pulling the strings from the shadows, manipulating the tides of fate with precision. The Djinn's ransom was not merely an object of value, it was a keystone to something far greater, a hidden truth that had eluded scholars, thieves, and kings alike. A flicker of movement at the tunnel's end sent a jolt of awareness through him. He stilled, listening. The soft scuff of a boot against stone, the faintest shift in air pressure. He was not alone. Of course, he had expected as much. The question was, who had made the first move? A low hum vibrated through the walls, the faint sound of machinery clicking into motion, a trap. The realization struck an instant before the overhead, lamps flickered to life, illuminating the space with a harsh, sterile glow. The tunnel was no longer an abandoned ruin. It had been repurposed into something far more insidious. Steel grates sealed the exits with a mechanical hiss. and unseen gears locked into place, encasing him in a perfect snare. Lupin's mind worked fast. He had been maneuvered into a corner, but there was always a way out. Always. His eyes scanned the surroundings, searching for the flaw, the overlooked detail that could be turned to his advantage. He had made a career out of slipping through impossible constraints, and this would be no different. A slow, deliberate clap echoed through the chamber. From the shadows emerged a figure cloaked in precision, exuding an aura of authority and quiet.
Menace. The mastermind at last. The pieces were falling into place. The Djinn's ransom had never been the true prize. It was a lure, bait in a grander scheme.
But to what end? And more importantly, had he already lost without realizing it? The weight of unseen choices pressed against him as he exhaled, steadying himself. The final game had begun. A measured silence stretched between Arsene Lupin and the figure in the shadows, thick with unspoken challenges. The slow, deliberate clap had not been one of applause, but of finality, an announcement that the game was ending and Lupin had been cast as the losing piece. The mastermind stepped forward, their presence refined, deliberate, and unshaken by the layers of deception that had led them both here. The dim overhead lights cast long shadows across their face, revealing only fragments of a carefully concealed identity. Every detail was a calculated enigma, too polished, too controlled, as if even their very movements had been rehearsed. Lupin, however, was not one to dwell on theatrics when there were answers to be unravelled. His mind worked in overdrive, analysing the mechanics of the trap he had willingly walked into. The sealed tunnel, the flickering industrial lights, the faint hum of electric currents running through the steel barriers. It was a constructed snare, perfected to ensure that he would be left with no exit, no loophole, no sleight of hand to conjure his escape. And yet, escape was inevitable. The Djinn's ransom had been the centerpiece of this elaborate game, but the motives behind its pursuit had remained obscured. Too many players had entered the fold, each with their own reasons, their own secrets. The artifact itself was valuable, certainly, but there had always been something more, something beyond gold and reputation. Lupin had stolen countless treasures in his time, but this one had felt different from the start. He watched the figure before him, measuring their stance, their breathing, their level of control. The true power in any confrontation did not lie in weapons or numbers, it lay in knowledge. And knowledge, Lupin knew, was something he had always possessed, in abundance. His eyes flicked to the smallest of details, a hairline fracture in the steel barrier to his left. A ventilation shaft too narrow for a man to fit through, but not impossible for manipulation. The faint, rhythmic flicker of the overhead bulbs, subtle, almost imperceptible, but enough to indicate an underlying electrical instability, a flaw in the system. Good. He only needed one. The mastermind tilted their heads slightly, as if observing Lupin in return, waiting to see how he would react to this orchestrated checkmate. But Lupin had never played by conventional rules. If the game was rigged, he simply rewrote the rules to favor him instead. His hands rested loosely at his sides, his posture deceptively relaxed. The steel walls had sealed him in, the exits had been locked, and yet he smiled. Because the moment a trap is sprung, it ceases to be a trap. The true question was not whether he could escape. It was what his opponent truly wanted from him. The air in the chamber shifted, the tension tightening like a rope, pulling at both ends. A moment of calculation passed between them, a battle of unspoken strategy. Somewhere in the depths of the tunnel, machinery groaned, gears clicking faintly as the system continued its intended function. Lupin's fingers curled slightly, a barely noticeable movement, but one that signified something critical. He had
already chosen his next move. The Djinn's ransom had led him here. Now it was time to uncover why.
The tension in the sealed chamber thickened, pressing in like an invisible force. Arsene Lupin had faced many adversaries before, lawmen, rivals, secret societies, but this one was different. Their presence carried no desperation, no telltale flicker of nervousness. They were confident, methodical, assured of their victory. But that, Lupin knew, was their first mistake. His opponent stepped forward, their footsteps echoing softly against the steel flooring. The air smelled of cold metal and electrical ozone, the telltale scent of an underground facility not meant to be found. The ventilation system hummed steadily above, a mechanical rhythm that should have been insignificant, yet Lupin's mind catalogued it with precision. Do you understand now? The voice was smooth, measured, too controlled. It was the voice of someone who had planned this moment, orchestrated it down to the last second. Lupin did not respond. His silence was his strongest weapon. Instead, he let his mind unravel their pieces. The Djinn's ransom had always been more than an artifact. It had served as a lure, an invitation, pulling him deeper into a web that had yet to reveal its true design. He had traced its origins, deciphered the coded messages hidden. In forgotten tomes followed a trail of whispered legends. But now, in this moment, he understood something he had not before. It was never about the artifact. It was about him. The realization sent a pulse of amusement through him. His reputation had preceded him, as it always did. The Djinn's ransom
had been the bait, but the true prize had been Arsene Lupin himself. A trap, not just to ensnare him, but to test him.
To see if he could decipher the unseen game before it reached its final move. His captor watched him closely, waiting for a sign of understanding. Lupin obliged them, a faint smirk curling at the corner of his lips. "You anticipated every move," he said, his voice a quiet murmur against the steady hum of the chamber. "But tell me, did you anticipate what I would do next?" Because that was the difference between an orchestrator and a player. One relied on control. The other thrived in chaos. Lupin shifted subtly, a calculated adjustment of weight that seemed inconsequential, but in reality it was the start of something.
A chain reaction. His opponent's eyes flickered just for a fraction of a second. A hesitation. Lupin had already won. The chamber suddenly hissed, a burst of pressurized air escaping from the hidden seams in the walls. A single, miscalculated
variable, one his captor had overlooked, the smallest fracture in their plan. The air currents shifted, revealing the faintest shimmer of an illusion, thin, nearly undetectable, a hidden panel, an unaccounted exit. He had noticed it the moment he stepped inside. It was a flaw in the architecture, an overlooked redundancy in the security measures. And now it was his escape route. Lupin moved without hesitation. A single step, a flick of his wrist. The mechanism was already in motion before his opponent could react. A sharp, mechanical whir filled the space as the hidden door slid open, revealing a narrow passage beyond. The steel barriers had sealed him in, but the very same system had given him a way out. The irony was almost poetic. His adversary moved, but Lupin was faster. With a final glance back, he stepped through the opening, disappearing into the labyrinth beyond. The chamber sealed behind him, leaving only the whisper of his laughter in the air. The game had changed, and now Lupin held the key. The hidden passage was narrow, its walls pressing in with an oppressive stillness. Lupin navigated it with practiced ease, his steps soundless against the grated flooring. The air was stale, laced with the metallic tang of machinery long undisturbed. Overhead, unseen mechanisms thrummed, a subterranean heartbeat pulsing beneath. The surface of the city, every second counted. The chamber behind him was already being overridden. His captor, whoever they were, had anticipated his intelligence, but not his instinct. That was their error. Plans could be calculated, variables measured, but intuition? That was beyond their control. Lupin's fingers brushed against the wall, seeking imperfections in the cold metal. There had to be a pattern, an escape route woven into the architecture, buried beneath the layers of security. He had found one hidden exit. Now he needed another. His pulse remained steady, controlled. The thrill of the unknown sharpened his senses, each moment feeding into the puzzle unraveling before him. His captors had built this place to contain, not to escape from. That made them blind to the pathways a mind like his could uncover. Then there, a slight indentation. Barely visible, but Lupin knew what to look for. A design flaw, an engineer's oversight, a miscalculation disguised within the seamless structure. his fingers pressed against the seam, feeling for resistance. The metal was reinforced, but the mechanism behind it was not. A click, a subtle shift. The panels slid open, revealing a ventilation shaft descending into darkness. Not an elegant escape, but an effective one. Lupin did not hesitate. He slipped inside, his body moving with precision, muscles coiled for balance. The shaft was tight, the air thick with dust and disuse. He maneuvered downward, every movement controlled, calculated. Above him, the muffled sound of voices echoed through the chamber he had left behind. They were searching. Good, let them. Descent ended abruptly, dropping into a maintenance corridor lined with dormant consoles. Fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting long, skeletal shadows. This was old infrastructure, forgotten by those who had repurposed the facility above. Perfect. Lupin moved swiftly, his mind cataloguing details. A rusted sign, Arabic script beneath peeling paint, a symbol partially obscured, one he recognized. This facility was older than it seemed. Whatever operation was using it now had built over something ancient. Something lost. And that meant there were deeper secrets waiting to be uncovered. His exit was close. A service hatch locked with a mechanical override, primitive but secure. A lesser mind might have struggled. Lupin merely smiled. His fingers worked swiftly, unfastening the panel with practiced ease. Tumblers clicked into place, and the lock yielded with a reluctant sigh. The hatch swung open, revealing a tunnel stretching beyond the reach of light. The air here was different, cool, damp, carrying the scent of earth and stone. A forgotten passage. Lupin stepped through, sealing the hatch behind him. He was no longer being pursued. He was hunting now. The game had changed once again, and he intended to win. The night had settled over Paris, its streets bathed in the amber glow of gas.
Lamps. The Seine flowed in quiet defiance, carrying whispers of secrets too ancient to be spoken aloud.
In the heart of the city, atop a balcony overlooking the Louvre, Arsene Lupin stood alone, a glass of wine untouched beside him. The Djinn's ransom had been claimed, but at what cost? The artifact, veiled in myth and deception, had nearly consumed him. Layers upon layers of deceit had unraveled before him, yet the final truth still eluded his grasp. He had won, escaped the labyrinth, outwitted the mastermind, and yet there was something unfinished. He reached into his coat pocket and retrieved a single playing card, the King of Spades. The same card that had been slipped into his hand during his escape, left behind by an unseen player. In this grand game, his fingers traced the edge of the card. A single phrase had been scrawled on the back in precise, deliberate ink. Not over yet, Lupin exhaled, a slow, knowing smile forming at the corner of his lips. Far below, the city moved on, oblivious to the war fought in the shadows. The Djinn's ransom was no longer the prize. He had come to realize that too late. It had always been about something bigger. A new game had begun, and this time he wasn't the one holding all the cards. As he turned, a figure emerged from the darkness of his suite, a silhouette, familiar yet impossible, a presence he had long believed to be gone. Lupin's heart skipped once, just once. Then, with a whisper of silk and a knowing glance, the figure vanished, leaving behind nothing but a scent, jasmine and gunpowder, and a single word whispered through the night air: checkmate. Thank you for tuning in to Cafe Stories. If you enjoyed the intrigue and suspense, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon to stay updated on more captivating adventures. Your support keeps the stories coming and the mysteries alive. Until next time, stay curious, stay sharp, and keep the mystery alive.